Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by our Table of Disappointment. This is How They Got Away, the show where we discuss the unsatisfying endings to your favorite unsolved or unpunished true crime and corporate greed stories. I'm Annalise, your host for today. I have my co-host here.
Kelsey.
I stumbled that you come in with the It's great. And we have two guests today.
Anna.
I can't get over that. I guess I'm what you say, Stephanie.
Hey. Today we're gonna bring it back down, real down. And today we're gonna be talking about two pretty old unsolved cases. One is from 1902 and the other one's from 1913. So
Both 100 years old at least.
Yeah. And both involve a Mary. So great. Our first one's from Australia, which is fun. We've mostly stuck in the US so far.
I did one in the UK, but I think this is the farthest we've gone.
Oh yeah, you did. I forgot. Yeah. So this case is about a girl named Mary Schippan. And before I really get into it, a lot of the information I got comes from an article from Sue Polkinghorne, who had extracted the information from the trial of Mary Schippan by Peter Donovan. Just to put that out there. So, New Year's Day, 1902. Johanne Elizabeth Schippan, otherwise known as Bertha, was 14 years old and the youngest of her family.
Where do we get Bertha from? Her name is Joanna Elizabeth Schippan, but everyone calls her Bertha?
I assume it comes from Elizabeth, and someone else must be named Joanne, I assume.
Wait, second question.
Yeah.
Is this Mary?
No, that'll come clear later. So,
hang on, we're not there yet.
So she lived in this tiny German farming settlement, and Towida in southern Australia. Specifically, it's outside of this valley area. And at the time, this was a really quiet, isolated place, according to the residents. And just for context, Australia had just united its 6 colonies into the Commonwealth of Australia the year before in 1901.
It's always the tiny towns. It's always the small town where nothing happens, and then suddenly shit happens.
Yeah, so we have a very new and kind of separated Australia that's just coming together now, and now this is just a small settlement too. So it's not like there's a lot of people around, and even in the country, still not it's not the Australia we know today. So Bertha's parents, Matt and Joanne, which I guess is why they call her Bertha, because her mother is Johanne. There we go. We're going to visit some relatives. So they had left her oldest sister, Mary, who was 24 or 25, depending on the source, in charge of her 3 other siblings who were staying that night. There are another 3 siblings that were working at another farm at this time. So it's a pretty big family. But
back in the day when you had 6 kids to run the farm.
Exactly. But it was only Mary, Bertha, and the 2 brothers who is at the home. So everything was normal and peaceful, nothing was strange. The 2 brothers decided that they were going to go sleep in one of these rooms attached to one of the farm sheds because they're being boys and just doing their thing. And so that left Mary and Bertha alone in the house when they went to bed at 8 p.m. Around 10 p.m., only 2 hours later, Mary claims to have woken up. I know, I went weird with later there.
Only 2 hours later?
Only 2 hours later. Mary claims to have been woken up to a bearded man laying across her chest.
Literally the most terrifying thing I could possibly think of waking up to.
I was just going to say sleep paralysis demon.
You know? So Mary scrambled away and then ran to her brothers, leaving Bertha behind.
Okay, but in fairness, you wake up in I assume a dead sleep. There's a strange man on top of you. You are not thinking, who's in the house? Let me take a quick roster. Let me make sure I know where everybody is. You're thinking, I need to get to where I am safe.
So the brothers, like, wake up to Mary being like, oh my God, there's someone in the house. We got to go get help. And so the brothers are
Sorry, do we know how old the brothers are at this point?
I don't remember from the article. I don't remember if it was listed or not. They are younger than Mary, though. So they are under 20, and Bertha is the youngest. So they are older teens, I'm guessing. So they ran to the neighbor for help. The neighbor declined to help.
So first of all, they're in the farming community, so I assume they're on a farm. So that's acres and acres of land I assume they have to cross to get to their nearest neighbors. And then the neighbor's like, nah.
Yeah, it was like, you have like these kids banging on your door, like, help, there's something happening. You're like, I don't see how that's my problem. Like, excuse me?
It's the O'Hennessy's again. They're just making it up. Just go back to bed.
They really just went like, are those kids like asking for help?
Maybe they like assumed they were robbers, because I don't know how common that was of a ruse in the early 1900s, but like that is a thing people do nowadays, is like knock on your door saying, oh, hey, there's this thing, or oh, hey, I need your help, or oh, hey, can I use your phone? Obviously, they didn't have phones back then, so that's not going to work, but maybe they thought it was some kind of ruse to get into their house.
I feel like they might have thought it was more of a prank
Maybe.
at that time, because it's like, I don't know, stealing shit.
I mean, I have to imagine this small, like, rural area that you know each other. They know these boys. I mean, that you have the other children working at other farms during this time too. So there must be something going on. I really don't know.
Hate these boys in particular, or this family. Like maybe they had beef with the family, or maybe the boys were known for pulling shit like that.
Who knows? There's no explanation as of right now that I know of, and I doubt we'll get one at this point.
Anyone who knows is dead.
Yeah. So they had to run 1 kilometer or 0.6 miles to the district constable Lambert's house, who's like, okay, yeah, let's go. They came back to the house and they found Bertha dead.
I mean, honestly, that doesn't surprise me with the amount of time that it took for them to get help for something to have happened.
Bertha had been stabbed 40 times.
My God. Do you think they killed her? I never understand when they stab multiple times. Like, I get it's like a rage thing, but it's like, I think you got it, my dude. But then there are other times where you hear cases where they're stabbed, like the Slender Man case where she was stabbed like something like 19 times and still lived. Some of y'all just not good at murder. I don't want you to be good at murder, but, you know, if you're going to choose to murder, maybe practice? I don't know.
Some people are just built different. So within all that, it's all over her body and her neck where this happened. Some sources claimed that she had been slashed from ear to ear 5 times.
Slashed and not stabbed?
Like slashed through. You know what I mean? Like someone's holding the body and goes, all gross like.
I feel like I wouldn't be able to differentiate one time from the second time from the third time. Like at some point I'd just be like, yeah, there's a cut there.
This guy
it does call into
for
question
real.
Forensics of the time, like how accurate that is.
Yeah, and of course there's all sorts of different sources about this, and some of them play a little different story about how it took place, when things happened. It's all like a bit muddled because record keeping isn't the best in 1901.
Back then it's just Nosy Nancy and Nosy Nancy's cousin.
And Nosy Nathaniel.
Yeah, Nosy Nathaniel. I was trying to think of another good alliteration and I couldn't.
And Nosy Nathaniel is known for exaggerating a little bit as he talks about it over the water cooler.
And he goes, oh,
to his
I'm
friend
not
exaggerating Ethan.
So Once they arrived, there was no sign of a bearded man. And I'm also not sure what Mary was supposed to be doing when all this was happened. There wasn't really, yeah, maybe. There wasn't really a lot to go off of for that. So, of course, after this happened, efforts began to figure out what happened.
Fair enough.
Obviously, the parents came home, and
how did they get word to them? It's 1902.
A pigeon? I don't fucking know.
Telegram.
Yeah, telegram. Boop, 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 boop. Hey, boop, 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 boop.
I have a message.
Dead.
Your
boop,
daughter
boop, boop,
is dead.
Come home.
Shit. Damn it.
It is not the telegram you want to get on vacation.
They respond back like, tuberculosis? Boop, 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 boop. No. Boop, boop, boop,
no
boop.
heart.
Murder.
Horrific. No follow-up, just horrific. Great. So a coroner's inquest started at the Schippan home after a funeral that was held. Several witnesses were called, but no one was able to identify who could have been this like supposed bearded man that Mary claims to have seen.
Yeah,
and so
what do you mean witnesses? Nobody was there.
Yeah, I'm guessing like neighbors.
The neighbor that didn't help? You mean that neighbor?
So this was happening. And with the inquest occurring, Dr. Ramsey Smith, who was the city coroner and head of the Department of Health, was called to do an examination.
Right.
And to look around the house, look around the area, check the body, all those kinds of things. Here is what he had found. He had found hair had been pulled out by the roots and were kind of like around the house. So you could tell from like the follicle that had been yanked from someone's head. There was blood on Mary and Bertha's clothing, but they're unable to tell if the blood on Mary's clothing was human blood or not because she had been butchering sheep with her father days earlier.
The other thing too is, and I don't know, maybe you're going to get into it, but the guy was on top of her. There's no way to know if Bertha was already dead at that point. It's very possible that that is Bertha's blood and that's how it got there. Or maybe Mary murdered her sister for no known reason.
So, Constable Lambert, from what he could tell, there was no sign of a stranger coming into the house and no sign of a stranger in the area. There was no disturbances in the house, like things weren't knocked over and stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's the middle of nowhere. It's like, you don't have to be like Anna and break into the house that you're house sitting in because you lock yourself out. Nobody's locking the door.
Damn, way to call me out like this.
You just walk in.
That's true. 1902, they were like, wow, is that Sandy's house? I'm going to go in. Say hello. Sandy's
Hello,
not
Sandy.
here. I think I'm going to murder.
Jesus.
I'll also borrow some sugar. Sandy's sugar is very good for my tea.
Sandy has top-notch sugar.
We're just
It's
full of
sugar in the
alliterations
raw.
today.
During all of this evidence gathering and questioning, Mary had admitted to having a relationship with a man named Gustav Nischk. I can't say his name right.
Mary.
So apparently, spectators were removed after this confession because it was like the hot tea, and they were disappointed that they couldn't hear the full details.
That's horrible. But, and I'm not defending these people, but it's 1902. You're in a tiny, tiny town in the middle of barely unified Australia. There is nothing else going on.
Mm-mm. This is like the tea of the century for them.
Literally.
So this became, like, these details about Mary and this relationship became labeled as like the sensational thing within like the media. So whenever anyone was talking about this case, they're like the sensational case because of this particular detail. Gustav was 21 and was questioned and said that their relationship had been going on for a year, which had completely destroyed Mary's reputation. Now, I don't know what's so scandalous in particular about this. I'm guessing the fact that they were hiding it, and I'm wondering if like relations occurred. And that's,
I feel like people have to assume that after like a year of being together, and also no one knowing that you're together, and also assumably you're sneaking around, because it's not like you're just together but you didn't tell anybody. It's like, we're together behind the barn.
The theory then became that Mary had killed Bertha to prevent her from telling her father about this relationship. According to different sources, their father was a disciplinarian, and at one point had supposedly gotten into an altercation with some young men and shot one of them in the leg. And so he stood trial at the Supreme Court in 1896 and was acquitted.
This sounds like a really stable guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why Mary was so worried about him finding out about her life. And I'm not trying to make it like a political, like, parenting style thing, but, like, you know, if you're that strict, your kids are just gonna murder your other kids to hide shit from you. I'm just not good.
At the end of the coroner's inquest, the coroner announced the result of the jury was with this quote: Bertha Elizabeth Schippan met her death by having her throat cut by Mary Augusta Schippan.
I like that he replaced her first name, Joanna, with Bertha instead of her middle name with Bertha, or just adding Bertha anywhere in there.
So, of course, because this was just an inquest, Mary was not sentenced yet. They still had to go through trial and determine, like, all charges, all of this stuff. I do want to show you a picture of her real quick just to get a visualization of who we are talking about.
Also that, like, I don't know a lot about Australian law, and of course this is early days Australia, so I don't know if it was just different then, but, like, how are you supposed to innocent until proven guilty if the coroner's just like, it was you? There's no way it was anybody else. Not even like, oh, this person's DNA was found at the scene. Like, this would happened because of this person. Anyway, jury of your peers will decide.
The coroner being like, you were stinky, and I think it was you. Everyone in the court. Well, he looked at the body, so perhaps. That do be whack, though.
She just seems like a nice lady. Do we know how tall she was, or how, like...
I do not have her measurements, no.
I don't have her measurements?
Can you imagine having, like, some dead lady's measurements from way back when? Like, what are these numbers for? Well, it was Bertha's measurements.
Might be important one day.
It might be. Stabbing someone 40 times is like, or over 40 times is really hard. Of course, farm work is also really hard, so she probably was built.
Well, I do want to say, sorry, going back to the coroner's inquest thing, it's interesting because how things used to work is that they would grab jurors and then do a coroner's inquest to determine that a crime had even happened. You know, nowadays how we have police that do their investigative work and then go charge people and bring them to court. It used to be that you had a jury beforehand during this inquest to determine a crime had happened and the nature of the crime in order to then even charge someone.
Because, you know, Jeff's really good at criminal law.
I think
our neighbor Jeff.
I think it was Morbid where they had this long joke during one of their podcasts that they had just, like, grabbed a man out of a bar. It's like, we need one more juror to determine that this crime had happened. And he's drunk and they're, like, bringing him out.
The crime happened and it was you taking me for my drink. How dare you? not to make light. Also, I had a thought. Oh, it was just, I used to read books about, like, people who work with dead bodies, morticians. And I remember one of them was, like, this person who was saying, like, a crime against, like, elderly people went, like, unnoted for a really long time. And, like, it, like, led to a change in the way they process bodies so that now, I think this is specifically a UK author, so it's important to note that this is, like, something for the UK, is that, like, with old people, they assumed that if they died, like, in care or something, it was probably just old age or, like, a known sickness or something. But now it's, like, if you haven't been in the hospital in, like, X number of days or weeks, they have to, like, check your body just in case it was a murder or, like, in case something untoward happened, because, like, there were just cases of, like, so many random old people. And I was just thinking with that kind of thing that, like, just pulling Jeff off the street or some random drunk guy to look at a body and be like, did something happen to this old person, would be like, nah, that looks like an old person. Old people just die.
There's so many laws that are in place that you hear that law and you're like, Something happened. Now we have a law. That's just how the entire legal system just is.
Mm-hmm. Something has to happen in order for a law to be made, apparently, which is great. We love that.
We love that.
So, of course, after this inquest, Mary was not sentenced. The inquest just established they believed the crime had occurred. So Mary was formally charged with Bertha's murder and then sent to await trial. So in March 1902, she appeared before Chief Justice Sir Samuel Adelaide Gowell with Sir Josiah Simon as her defense. And apparently, Josiah Simon was like the lawyer.
I mean, he was knighted. He's a sir.
Simon, during all this, portrayed Gustav as the villain. And so this increased public sympathy for Mary and then increased hatred for Gustav, who was attacked by a crowd from the court when he was going to his lodgings and then had to be escorted by police after that.
That's crazy. Does Gustav have a beard?
I don't know what Gustav. Let me look up this man.
Because I'm just thinking back to Mary's story of finding a bearded man on top of her, and like,
he has a mustache.
Guilty. I'm kidding.
Okay, one second. That's him. Got a mustache.
How old is he at the time of this photo?
I don't know at the time of this photo.
Again, to be fair, this was way back. This was way back when, before they had proper skin care.
So
it's interesting though that beards were so common back then, and he doesn't have one. On the other hand, he was 21, so maybe he just could not grow one yet.
Yeah.
He kind of looks like what a cowboy tries to be, like the mustache.
He looks like he's trying to be a cowboy.
He probably, honestly,
was a cowboy.
Yeah.
Australian cowboy. Let's go.
Let's go. It's so interesting though. I was like, maybe it was Gustav and she just didn't recognize him, because you generally don't expect your lover to just show up covered in blood at your house in the middle of the night. Or maybe she was in on it and she like tweaked the story a little bit, but it had the grain of truth of there being a man and it was Gustav. I don't know.
By the end of the trial, after less than 2 hours of deliberating, the jury came back with a not guilty verdict for Mary.
That's crazy.
And
there's no evidence at all. And also these people had to know her. Like we've covered this again and again, but it's a tiny town.
Yeah, you can't get an impartial jury from there either.
Can't. And nowadays there's kind of measures you can take in place if there's like a really well publicized case, or if it's a really small town and like people are involved, that you can get a jury from another town to get more of an unbiased thing. But I don't think that was a thing you could do back then.
Mm-mm.
Jeremiah knows me. He knows I don't know how to murder. You know? That's also the point. This was a jury probably solely of men.
Oh, yeah. Like, I think 100%. No way.
I know, I said probably, but because I wasn't like sure exactly what year they started in letting women be on the jury in Australia. But yeah, like there's no way that
not 1901 or 1902.
No, definitely not. So there's also that narrative of like maybe there's a sexist assumption that women can't murder. Women can be murderers too, you know?
So
girl queen, girl boss.
Mary, just to wrap up Mary's story, after all this happened, 17 later, she died of tuberculosis, never having anything solved. TV, it always comes up.
I made that joke.
Like,
yeah.
You did.
I did. Tuberculosis. I was so. I mean, sorry, not to have a thrill, but like, tuberculosis was the thing. You know, it got like what? It got like the Bronte sisters. It got Edgar Allan Poe's like cousin and mom.
Maybe also Edgar Allan Poe, but also maybe not.
Maybe it was rabies, or maybe it was that like getting people drunk at the polls thing. I mean, who else? Oh my God, I watched The Wind Rises recently. I'm on a bit of a tangent, and like that in the movie, it was like, oh shit, tuberculosis. Not historically accurate, but a lot of people tuberculosis.
Oh yeah, it's like I think still today it's considered the number one killer of humans when you take into consideration historical data. But that's crazy because I just like did the math a little. She's like 42, maybe 43.
Really, it's really sad. And it's really sad. I mean, this is unsolved, so there's still like a sliver that she could have done it.
Right? Can you imagine living with her, like the rest of her family being like, I know you didn't do this, but then also it gets, years go by, months go by, your daughter is dead and your other daughter is still here, and there's got to be at the very least a little bit of survivalist guilt on that one, even if she didn't do it. And you just got to walk around town after all of the people accused you of murder, like the doctor who pretty much said she did it. You got to see that guy around. He's probably the only doctor in the town. You still have to go to checkups with him.
It's awkward.
I mean, also besides that, like you said earlier, Annalise, her dad was known as a disciplinarian. Like, no matter, even if he doesn't find her guilty of like doing that, like there's still the fact that they left Bertha to die, and like he could still blame them for that. Like he could just be mad at her because her relationship got aired out like a year later. Like the fallout after that trial.
Mm-hmm. Did she and Gustav ever get married, or did their relationship never recover?
I don't imagine the relationship recovered. I feel like blaming him and villainizing him for her case probably did not lead to a sugary wedding after the fact.
But on the other hand, her reputation's ruined. He's the only one she could have married at that point. Maybe a like widower, maybe. But other than that,
go to a new town, start a new identity.
I'm not Mary. I'm Augusta.
Do we know if she stays in that town for the rest of her life or if she leaves?
I think she lived the rest of her life in that town. Give me a second.
Crazy. I mean,
yeah, she returned. She returned to the community, and she lived out her life there until 1919. She became reclusive and never married.
Right, because her reputation was ruined. And honestly, like, why do you want to
imagine going back to a place where you're like, I'm coming home, and everyone's like, aren't you the one that killed your sister? And she goes, I thought you would all forget about that. I will now stay in my home forever.
I will say that once her trial was over and it was announced non-guilty, Mary went out of the courthouse, and there was a crowd of 300 people that were cheering as she left. So
the people generally the attitude of the town was that she had not done it.
Yeah. Gustav had to leave through a rear entrance. So
they were like, this bitch weird.
I mean, I kind of feel bad for Gustav, but on the other hand, maybe he did do it. And then on the other hand, maybe Mary did do it. Maybe they both did it.
Of different rumors about what happened. Besides this, I will say one of them that's interesting that comes up quite often, but is still not believable, is that her father, Mr. Schippan, was the one that killed Bertha.
I mean, he does sound like a really violent person. I'm not disputing that at all. He's been in trouble with the law about that before, and I highly doubt he had morals about not being violent with his family. But on the other hand, wasn't he in another town?
So this is why it's a crazy theory. The theory was that Mr. Schippan rode back home, which I'm wondering how far they were. It might not have been that far.
I doubt it was very far.
Yeah. So the idea is that he rode back home that night after Bertha had allegedly witnessed him murder a traveling hawker, so someone selling their wares on the streets. And then she threatened that she would reveal it to someone. She's like, oh my God, you killed someone. We can't keep that hidden. That's gotta go somewhere. We gotta tell people. We gotta know. And then her father killed her to keep quiet. Not super believable, because that requires a lot of different moving parts and things being hidden and covered up.
They'd have to have murdered a traveling salesperson, gotten rid of the body somehow, went on vacation with his wife, come back in the night to threaten his child, then murder her, then ride back so that they could receive word that their child was dead,
and then ride back home.
and then ride back again. I love, though, that the first two theories, well, I don't love it, it's sad, but the first two main theories, I guess, are that she was killed to keep quiet about something. Like, there's not even a real reason to kill her. It's like, you just want to cover up the shitty thing that you did.
Yeah. All the theories people have is covering up the relationship or covering up a murder.
That's really crappy.
Yeah. So that was Bertha's story and Mary's story as well. To shift to the next one, the theme here is young women, unfortunately.
Love it.
We don't love it, but you know.
I love strong female protagonists.
This is another one where someone's life was destroyed. So
no.
Yeah.
Annalise, I can only handle so much disappointment in a single evening.
This is the table of disappointment. So
true, we're getting an extra. We're getting
going on a
two
disappointment
appetizers.
diet.
So this
Papa's
is
plates, if you will.
So this is the case of Mary Phagan. She was a 13-year-old girl who was working at the...
Nice. A 13 and like a 14-year-old? Come on.
It's really sad.
They're not even young women. Those are just girls.
So she was working at the National Pencil Company in Atlanta, Georgia.
Making those number twos.
Oh,
No,
wait,
that came out worse. That came out wrong.
This is her before we get too much into it. With the bows in her hair.
A baby. She was a baby.
If you look it up, this is one of the few photos that come up, but she has like these, like, of course it's black and white, so I'm going to say white, bows in her hair on each side. She looks very sweet. She has a little braid.
Really short fringe bangs.
Of course.
Just a little bit of bang. That's as much as she was allowed to have.
Obviously.
That seems like some kind of traditional hairstyle. I don't know what country, though.
It feels Dutch when I look at it, but I have no idea what.
I have no idea.
I
Folks
don't know.
in the comments, look up the photo, tell us, educate us.
Because I don't know where the last name Phagan.
Phagan?
Phagan?
Like Oliver Twist Phagan?
Probably, that sounds right.
Dang, I was thinking like Carl Sagan, but Phagan.
I went straight to Oliver Twist because we've got a poor little kid who just needs to get a break.
So on April 26th, 1913, around noon, she had gone to the factory that she worked at to collect her pay from Leo Frank. Mr. Frank was a Jewish factory superintendent, which is important to remember.
Which part?
The Jewish part.
The Jewish part, okay. Oh no, Annalise!
It's bad. No case in 1913 involving a Jewish man is going to go
well.
Unfortunately. Because of, anyway, you'll find out, you'll understand why, and then you'll be upset.
I'm already upset.
So that night, at 3:30 a.m., so technically it was the 27th, Mary was found by a night watchman in the basement of the factory.
Oh my God.
She had been sexually assaulted and strangled.
No!
Frank, having been the last person she was known to be with, became the prime suspect.
I know that we're going to make this a racist thing, but he also was the last person to see her, and that is suspicious.
This case was huge.
Because she was a baby.
In the words of the New York Times, the murder crystallized working class Atlanteans' resentment over their children's exploitation by heartless capitalists.
I was thinking about that too. You said she was working at the pencil factory, and I know that was more common that was really common back then, but like, oh, come on.
Wait.
She probably went after school too, like around noon. That was probably, I don't know what day of the week this was, but she probably went after school to get her pay.
I mean, would she have even been getting an education at 13? What's the education system? I'm getting distracted. I really just want to say, do you remember Frances Perkins, Secretary of
Sorry.
Saturday? what is it? Like Frances Perkins, was she the Secretary of Labor? Remember our high school teacher loved Frances Perkins, who was like the first woman to be in like the line of succession as in like FDR's presidency. And she was one of the people. She was one of the people who championed like children not working and like limitations to like the amount of labor that you do in a work week. We were yet to Frances Perkins. It was pre-Frances Perkins.
Yeah, she probably wasn't going to school at this point.
Sad.
As you can tell, there's a lot of anger brewing around this case already. Young girl, working class, and then you have these characters that come into play. So Frank was brought in for questioning, and later on April 29th was arrested and charged with the murder.
Whoa. So like 2-3 days, they're like, got him. Yep. It can't be anybody else.
The investigation was controversial because of the supposed torture.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, I know why, but why?
They fucking suck is why. And they thought, Jewish man, we're going to get him.
I don't want to be, I want to say that I don't want to be derivative, but I'm also saying like a Jewish man in which money was involved. I'm wondering if there was some racism specifically involving that Jewish stereotype.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And especially that like harping on like money and like capitalism and all. He was probably painted in a horrific light during all of this. Oh, yeah. Of course, he got charged and the press went crazy with this story.
Of course.
Sensationalized by publisher William Randolph Hearst. And this man, Tom Watson in particular, who was a white supremacist. And then there was a bunch of other reporters that was playing off the social tensions at the time. When it came to the trial.
Sorry, I don't even have words for that. I'm just sitting here with that, like, oh yeah, you're the white supremacist, so of course, yeah.
Super common and open at that time about that.
Just, you know what? I'm not trying to make the podcast political more than it already is, but you know what? People are getting a little too liberal about that stuff these days. Too liberal about being not liberal. I'm not saying you gotta be liberal, but you're being too liberal about being white supremacists.
I think you're being a little too open about being white, and in the cringe kind of way. None of that.
None of that.
Blech. Awful.
So when it came to the trial, the prosecution against Frank coached the testimony of this man, Jim Connolly, who was an African-American.
Of course.
Janitor at the company. Connolly's affidavits, important to note that each statement he gave would backtrack and renounce the last. He told this like elaborate and like unlikely story about his participation in the crime.
Of course.
He essentially claimed that he helped Frank dispose of Mary's body.
He didn't even dispose of her body. She just was in the basement. That's not even disposal. And I feel like I don't know enough about the legal systems in terms of affidavits to say if this is the thing or not. But I feel like if particularly a witness who has key information that results in your your sentencing, or you know what I'm saying, your guilty verdict, that's the word, retracts that statement, I feel like that should be grounds for an immediate retrial.
Sorry, I just want to note, while that was happening, we had a lovely guest star from a cat. His name is Persimmon.
Is here. He thinks that racism is bullshit, and he wants to know why this is happening. Keyboard.
With all this happening, there was very little sympathy for Frank from the public. The public had already decided that he was guilty. During the trial, most of the evidence was circumstantial, and character testimony actually favored Frank from his side. However, think about this time period. A lot of people were prejudiced against both Jews and African Americans, which unfortunately those prejudices would have the most influence. The prosecution played on that a lot. One of the things that they played on, which is such a weird thing, they played on the misconception around circumcisions, which it was, not common for people at this time. It was only common within the Jewish community. It wasn't like nowadays where they do it to prevent AIDS. Anyway, it was insinuated that because he was circumcised, he was deviant.
I can see the 1913s thinking that.
It's
That
literally
seems like a very 1913 thought.
Yeah, it's literally the only reason I could find about why the circumcision was like controversial, is that it insinuated that he was like deviant, and that was the reason.
What's so wild about that is that it, like you were saying, circumcision is super common in the United States and Israel. Like nowhere else is it very common like it is here. But now it's so common, like that would not hold up for a single second.
No, I was just thinking, wasn't it like later with the cereal guy Kellogg who was like, oh, like circumcisions are in fact good because he was like masturbation is bad and like touching your genitals is bad. Or am I just misremembering Kellogg? It was all just I don't know, man.
I just remember he was like, masturbation is bad, and that's why I have made cornflakes to make you stop feeling excited.
The cornflake guy.
Yeah, that's all I know, but hearing this really makes me go, wow, pee-pee exposed? You are a deviant. If your penis is out and exposed, God doesn't like you. Must mean you hate God or something. Like, hello? Bro, it's just skin. Bro.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to say was with the character testimony that was positive towards Frank and like the fact that it ends up being discounted. It makes me think of a different trial that I read about, which happens like decades later during the like Red Scare, I think, with like Sacco and Vanzetti, and like they had great character references too, but like some of the people spoke English as a second language, like they had accents, like so there was not only a language barrier, their accents, and they also were like a racialized other. So like a lot of their testimony was discounted or thrown out or like not really cared about, and it just
I mean, I don't know if this is really the case to talk about it, but I feel like character statements are not helpful. First of all, they're dismissed as soon as they don't fit the narrative that the lawyers want to set up. And then also, like, you know, in particular with people who are serial sexual assaulters, you know, we've seen that a lot with people who are pedophiles but are upstanding members of communities. And then everybody else says, oh, they're great. You know, we've never had a problem with them. And then I feel like that just serves to further ostracize the victims who are like, yeah, but they hurt me just because they were nice to you. I don't know. I don't know if I have I don't know. I just have a thought. I don't know if I have a full opinion on that.
Sure. Another thing that they used were these unfavorable testimonies from a few young women that worked at the factory that kind of painted him as a pervert. I think most of them were kind of like, he stared at me, things like this and that. Like, there was nothing that was, from what I knew, that suggested that he had actually acted on anything or done anything. And this could just be, one, coerced, or two, you know, scared young girls. They hear this man is bad now, and they're looking back on every interaction that they've had with him. And they're like, oh my God, what if when he, like, handed me my money and he touched my hand, what if that meant something? Like, you know?
I mean, it's also...
Maybe he was creepy. Like, he could just be a little creepy.
He could be a little creepy. A lot of men are a little creepy. But also, like, there's that, like, thing with psychology. I've been talking a lot. I'm taking up space. I am on a podcast.
This is the podcast that you are on. You are literally, by definition, supposed to take up space.
But, like, you know, like, if you ask things in, like, certain ways, you can just trick people into thinking they remember things, too. Like, you can, like, psychologists have done this with, like, studies, and people can just invent new memories. Like, if the police officers, like, straight up might have tortured the guy to get, like, answers about like a sexual assault and murder he may or may not have committed, like, who's to say they weren't asking questions in such a way that it was, like, planting memories in people who might have given different testimonies otherwise.
A great point. And I just think about, you know, you put a lens on something, you're always going to think about it in a different way. But back to this trial. When it came to Connolly, this is so gross. racism helped him escape blame, which is fucked up.
Of course.
Because people were like dismissing any like lies or bumps in his story because, and this is horrific, he's a black man, so he's incapable of remembering the details of the complex story. What the fuck?
But we are gonna rely on his testimony to put away this other guy, though. So it only is that he only can't remember stuff when it's convenient for us, for him to not remember stuff.
Yeah. So fucked up.
I don't know if first of all, I don't know if Leo Frank did it. Second of all, I even more so doubt John Connolly. What was his first name? I'm sorry.
I've been calling Connolly so much, my mind is blanking. James, I think.
James, I knew it was a J. James Connolly was even involved at all. I don't know. There's like no evidence at all for anybody.
Jim. Oh my God.
It was Jim. You lied to me.
Okay, because I was like, wasn't it a different J name? But I'm like,
Jim is short for James.
I'm not seeing text, so I go.
They can be used. Like,
yeah.
You know, I said his first name once now, and then it was. Oh my God.
You are implanting memories. You are
implanting memories,
memories.
Timothy.
Timothy.
So, at the end of all of this, the jurors deliberated for 2 hours. Again, 2 hours.
What is with these short deliberation times? 2 hours is barely enough time to go over all the evidence, even though there's barely any evidence in these.
Yeah. But they found Frank guilty
Of
on
course.
August 25th, 1913. Following this, Tom Watson, the man I mentioned before, the white supremacist, called for violence.
Of course he did.
When he was
What does a white supremacist do but call for violence?
You know? And so he continued to get the public heated up and angry about all of this.
We love a poster.
Oh my God. This all came to a head on August 17th, 1915, so about 2 years later. Wait a minute while I say this.
Oh no.
Leo Frank was abducted from the prison.
From where? From prison?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Driven to Marietta, Mary's hometown.
Oh my God.
And lynched.
Of course. Why did they have to drive him all the way to the hometown? That is performative. That's all it is.
If he was guilty, I'd understand it, but
we can't do that. You can't do that.
You can't do that.
Man.
I understand the idea of bringing him to Mary's hometown. Do not agree with anything that's happening here. Anyway, this whole plot to take him from prison and lynch him was planned by a group of prominent Georgians, including elected officials and a former governor.
Guys, we can't be doing this. That is not how it works. If you're part of this system and you don't like how it works, you got to change the system. You can't just decide the system doesn't apply to me and do whatever the hell you want. That is not how it works. That is how we get problems.
Here's the thing. Many Georgians celebrated this. It was the call of violence they were asking for.
Interesting. I will remember those words for later when we overthrow the government.
Like, what does this solve? Even if he did do it, what does this solve?
I know.
You know what's so crazy? Like, we talk about gun violence today and, like, the way in which, like, people are numb to violence and, like, through, like, video games and nonsense like that.
Right?
And
people
then,
used
like,
to lynch people on the regular.
People not only used to
beheadings and hangings.
Not only that, they had postcards of lynchings. It's like sending your buddy in, like, fucking Mississippi, like, a postcard of you at the latest lynching. Like,
wish you were here.
Wish you were here.
When you're at the French Revolution and you're cutting off the rich people, and you're like, oh my God, Cousin Emile, I wish you were here in Versailles. We're cutting off Marie Antoinette's head or something. Wow.
Hey, yo.
That's weird.
What's also crazy is that for some beheadings, like, there was one case of this woman, I can't remember if she was hanged or beheaded, but there was, like, a murder that had been committed that she had done in tandem with her husband. Anyway, a crowd of 20,000 people arrived, and, like, someone died from being trampled in this crowd to watch her be, like, hanged or beheaded for the crime. Anyway.
Executed.
Public executions are a very
not-
strange thing to me. So strange.
First of all, hanged or beheaded, the Six musical. Second of all, both of those also take like time. Like it's not guillotines were not efficient. Beheadings were not efficient. Like sometimes you had to chop a second, a third time. The neck thick. Choking out on like being hanged takes time. You gotta see those nasty legs twitching. I only know that from a movie.
I wonder what the return rate was for people who would go to see an execution in person and then realize it's actually really fucked up. Do they keep coming because they're into that, or did they just not realize how fucked it is gonna be, and then they're like, I don't need to see that again?
You know what's crazy? There's bars that used to have windows that would have prime views of like the platform.
I could see that being a thing.
It was like the thing of the week to do.
Yeah, I was gonna go like, what else are you gonna do? Go
There's
to the
nothing
club
else
with
going
your
on.
Girls, get a drink, and then at 6 there's going to be a public execution.
Oh,
I don't know. Like, what else would
I'm so
you
glad
really
we
do?
came to the city this week.
It's me, it's Betty, it's Agatha. We're eating
Girl trip.
girl
It's
trip.
not
We're
sex in
eating
the city. It's execution in the city. Yeah.
we're eating like blood sausage to get the vibes.
Awful.
We got like some
7, 8.
liver, and we're gonna watch this guy fucking die.
Yay.
Girl boss.
Girl boss.
Anyway, story not quite over.
Oh, there's still more.
In 1982, way after,
Yeah, hello?
new evidence came to light.
No.
Alonzo Mann, who had been the office boy for Frank, spoke up with incriminating evidence against Connolly.
I trusted you. I didn't think you were involved.
This is what he stated. He had claimed to return to the National Pentanol Company, this is Alonzo, around noon on the day that Mary Phagan was murdered. So around the time that she was there. She had saw Jim Connolly carrying Megan Phagan's limp body. According to Mann,
you weren't gonna say anything?
According to Alonzo Mann, I like his last name's Mann. Anyway,
Alonzo
Man.
Connolly threatened to kill him if he told anyone, and his own parents advised him not to tell.
You know what? Fair enough. If you come across a person who's literally holding a limp dead body, I would believe them if they threatened to kill me. I'd be like, yeah, you've already done it. I believe you.
I will not let you do it again.
And Alonzo was 14.
He's a baby too. And his mom and dad are probably like, we shouldn't get involved because it's just gonna get in the way. And I don't want to like make an assumption, but Alonzo is it's not a quote unquote American name. So I'm wondering if maybe they were also of a different minority and we're like, no, if we get involved, we're immediately going to get pulled in.
I mean, his last name is Mann, though. It's a very, well, then again, I guess, what is it called when you have your name changed again? Where to make it easier. So, never mind. But, man, can you imagine just going like, hey, that girl seems to be about the same age as me. I will not get into this business because, that's scary.
Man is usually Germanic.
Anyway, so this new evidence
came. Either way that they have their 14-year-old working, so that also is a factor.
I don't think anyone around here except for Leo Frank has any kind of money.
Damn it.
So, a petition was created for a pardon for Leo Frank, which was initially denied. But in 1986, Georgia pardoned Frank for failing to protect him while he was in custody. Didn't address whether or not he was guilty.
I mean, I don't really know. At that point, it's been 60, 70 years. I don't truly know if you can say one way or the other if he's guilty or not based on the testimony of somebody. Did he give the test? Did Alonzo give the testimony as an older person, from years and years later? Or is this something that was written? it's one of those maybe not. Hard to say. But they definitely should take a responsibility for the fact that a ward of the state, because that's what prisoners are, was removed from state custody just because and murdered. That's so fucked up. And they should take responsibility for that.
That's not even a failure, though. Like, you said earlier, like, state officials and former state officials were a part of the violence. Like,
exactly. They just decided that the system didn't count for right now.
Like, when the system fails so aggressively that the people in the system have decided to take part in the violence, like, it shouldn't just be like, here's a pardon, like, sorry, we didn't do more. It's like, no, like, there should be restitution.
So after this, it's become widely believed that Frank was innocent, and that one of the popular theories is that Connolly did it. Connolly did not have a clean record. He had multiple arrests for being drunk and disorderly, or for drunk and disorderly conduct. He had 2 stretches on a chain gang. So his character comes into question, but I will say on top of that, there's 3 people who said that Connolly confessed to them that he had killed her. However,
on that hand, he probably should have said something.
But however, we don't know also, I mean, again, race could play a part in this, and that's why I'm a little hesitant. It could be that these people, he was saying that he had helped in dumping the body. So there could have been something with that when he was confessing things. I don't know. I think with the evidence that we have, it makes sense that Connolly would have done it, especially when he was changing his story so much when it came to what was happening with the body and where it went and his hand in all of this. But I am going to say that racism could also be playing a part with Connolly, and people are just going from one minority person to another because they really didn't investigate anyone else.
Right? Because that makes me question his record, because it was not unheard of to arrest Black people at the time, and even honestly today, if we're being really frank with it, for nothing. And then you're in prison for a while for nothing, and so now you have a record. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether or not to fully believe that. I mean, yeah, I believe that he was in jail, but I don't know what to think about what that says about his character. And as far as the confessions, you're right, like people might have just talked to him about it, and maybe he said one thing that they construed as a confession when he was mentioning that he was involved, and they were like, no, but he did it though. He did all of it though. And you're like, did he? That's so fucked up. Because there's just no answer. And you know what? Mary's just dead now, and she doesn't really get any justice for that, because the only 2 people they even bothered looking at, they only looked at for racist reasons.
Yeah, I really view there's 2 victims in this story. There's Leo and there's Mary. It's fucked up. But
disappointed on Elise. I'm really disappointed.
Yeah, that's what you get at our table of disappointment, y'all. So that is where we're going to leave off today. 2 disappointing cases, 2 young women. I'm wondering if next time, there was a couple cases that I was reading where it was, there's a lot of young women cases, unfortunately. There's a lot of children cases that are unsolved, unfortunately, as well. So
I was going to say, these were 13, 14-year-old girls. I don't know about calling them young women.
Yeah.
This is related, but it's also not related. I just want to say, what gets me about not investigating the other people is with a system that abuses children and that works children, you have white men and a lot of power over people, a vulnerable population that's unlikely to say anything, and that also doesn't have a lot of knowledge about sex, because it's a time period where they're not talking about that and sexual assault. So right. It could be that it was one of the white men who was leading the stuff, and maybe Mary dies because she fights or something, or it's the first time and things go wrong, but who's to say that there weren't other victims that just don't end up dead?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can there has to be, I mean, we know some cases of sexual assault within factories for young women or girls.
Yeah, it was not unheard of. It was disgustingly common.
I wonder what the statistics would be, because you obviously can't retroactively do statistics anymore. People from them have passed since then.
And who would report it at the time?
Exactly. No one's reporting at the time. So it's probably, unfortunately, extremely high.
Yeah, and then like the victims, like if they end up pregnant, like they just disappear because women who are pregnant aren't seen. Like if they're single and they end up pregnant, like it's just deemed their fault for whatever happens. There's no comprehension of like sex or rape or sexual assault, and so they just disappear, hidden away in the country by their families, and then like.
And that's for the families who can afford to do that.
Yeah. Oh my God, history repeats itself.
Woo!
No rights for women.
It's tragic. It's disappointing, and that's what you get at the table of disappointment.
Serving disappointment all day, every day. Today's soup is disappointment. Tomorrow's specials, disappointment.
And that's all we got for you. So we're just going to say bye and leave. And, push in your chair where you go. But, we understand if you leave all the trash here. Bye.